Welcome back to Opinion Court. Like we told you earlier, what is happening in the country currently, the court coalition led by Raila Odinga maintains they will remove IEBC commissioners from office. Of course, President Kenyatta and the Deputy William Ruto are saying the law should be followed. What are you saying on Twitter? Orango Roger says IEBC has let Kenyans lose confidence in its credibility. It's high time to fix this. And David Gishana says the solution is in our constitution, and that is to follow it. Keep talking to us on 22422 or on Twitter using the hashtag Opinion Court. Our guest tonight, Felix Odhiambo, who is the Country Director, Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Thank you so much for making time for us. Charles Kanjama, who is a lawyer, and of course, Edward Kisiangani, our resident panelist and analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for making time for us. And I'll start with you first. What do you make of what has been happening?
What you see around us is an indication of the rising political temperatures in this country, and everybody's feeling insecure about what would happen in 2017, and therefore everybody's hanging on something that would prove if they win, there will be an explanation. If they lose, there would be an explanation. So the political temperatures are rising, but with regard to the bigger question in the room about people wanting to remove the IEBC, one of the things that we need to ask Hussein is the fact that, for example, the Coalition for Reforms, CORD, knows there is a law in place on how to deal with the appointment of commissioners.
Right.
This law was passed in 2011. We have domesticated that law. It's now part of our laws. There has not been a proper move from the coalition to reform this law. But even if we tried to remove the commissioners right now, and we say now they should go, the docket, the number of commissioners that were allocated to Raila Odinga as Prime Minister now will be given to the President. That is how the law is. So what advantages do they have for moving this? I think the best way to go about it is for them to struggle and get a proper legislation that would completely shield the IEBC from political interference, and that has to be done within the domain of the Constitution. But for them to do what they did, again, people are reading mischief for no reason. The only thing is that we do not want them to go into the offices, IEBC offices, because 50,000 people cannot fit there, Hussein. What they should have done is that under Article 38 of the Constitution, they are entitled to that kind of picketing and demonstration. But they shouldn't go there in an indecorous manner. What they should do is that they can tell their supporters to wait for them at Uhuru Park. But for them as elected leaders of a political party, they can choose 5-6 people to present a petition. And in that way, there will be an orderly way of sorting out this thing. Are they going beyond the limits, Charles, of the Constitution, like you said?
I think the Constitution is a very interesting document. It's the product of a compromise. It's a compromise of politicians at the Naivasha Accords. It's a compromise of Kenyans. And it's a document that doesn't set very rigid limits. If you look at Chapter 4 on the Bill of Rights, it has some flexible or fluid way of dealing with some of these issues of fundamental rights and freedoms. And basically the key provision is Article 24 of the Constitution, which establishes limitations to various rights. So that apart from the few rights that are mentioned in Article 25, like the right to habeas corpus, the right to fair trial, and the right against torture, freedom from torture, all the other rights can be limited, in fact are limited, and Article 24 determines what constitutes or how to determine the limit of the right. So now you have one team making reference to Article 37 of the Constitution, which is the article that deals with freedom of assembly, demonstration, picketing. And you have another team that is making reference to Article 38, for example, that talks about independent electoral process, and they are saying that IEBC should be treated as an independent document, as an independent body to conduct the elections. So you are having people relying on different provisions of the same Constitution, and you will find each of them quoting. So it is not possible for me seated here to be the one to set
one is right or one is wrong.
Limit, just to say that each of them is relying on certain provisions, but the courts have already come up with principles that are derived from the Constitution in determining what is reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society, which is what Article 24 says. So, for example, if you stand for 3 hours on Uhuru Highway and decide to picket in the middle of the week, that is unreasonable. You are causing too much disruption to those going about the ordinary business. On the other hand, picketing always involves an amount of disruption. It's a question of determining what is permissible and what is not.
Not. Let me get Felix.
Thank you very much. Let me state right from the outset that the Constitution has imposed higher standards on elections and electoral process in this country. Article 38 that enshrines the political rights, Article 81 and Article 86 among others. The irreducible minimum in this context is that elections must be free, fair, credible, accurate and verifiable. I think this is the standard upon which this country should be able to assess itself. The problem is that we must acknowledge that we are heading into a stalemate, and the approaches that have been taken by the two leading coalitions, the ruling Jubilee coalition and CORD coalition, I think slightly missed the point. I think given the shortcomings that were realized in 2013 elections, it is a high time for the country to comprehensively discuss and come up with modalities of strengthening the electoral process in its entirety and not just the IEBC question ahead of the 2017 elections. I think that is the point.
But you know, Felix,
yes,
one of the things that is causing concern is, I agree with you that both sides are missing the point, the national good of everybody here. But when you look at the suggestions that are being made with regard to appointment of commissioners, for example, because the commissioners are the ones we are questioning, there's an indirect suggestion that probably the two big coalitions, CORD and the Jubilee, should meet and decide, with one group getting about 3 probably commissioners or so, and they share commissioners almost on the same level as IPGG.
It's actually what CORD wants.
That is what CORD wants. Now, for me, if you look at the Article 249, you go to 250 and 251 on the national commissions, independent commissions. We cannot allow one faction or two factions to sit on a table like this one and make decisions on who serves on an independent commission. So that is one of the things that is unacceptable from the point of view of CORD, but it's also unacceptable for Jubilee to imagine that because CORD is asking things in an unlawful manner, there is no problem. They must also come and say, yes, there is a problem. How do we sort it out? But we wouldn't allow the two coalitions to sit down and choose commissioners, because these commissioners will be one-sided. And suppose in 2022, this commissioner, there is no CORD, there is no Jubilee. Now, do we again meet and choose commissioners that favor a particular group?
I think what I would like to say is this. It's very key for IBC to function, for it to be independent.
Yes.
And it must be independent even of the parties that are in that competition. Yes. IBC is a referee, and the referee should not be chosen by any of the sides on the football field. Yet, the sides on the football field have a genuine interest in being part of the process that determines the rules. And IBC is the one that sets up the rules. So I don't think the teams should be the ones to choose the referee, but they should determine how the referee is chosen. And they shouldn't do it directly, but there should be an indirect mechanism, because they are not the only stakeholders. You and I, as ordinary voters, are stakeholders in the electoral process. The judiciary is a stakeholder. All the other institutions, business communities are stakeholder in the political process. So there must be a mechanism that allows us to get the best or the most competent or qualified people, but with diversity and with confidence building, to ensure that the teams that enter the football field or the political field in this case are confident enough that the referee will be a fair umpire, will be neutral, objective, and will not favor either party.
What you have let me say this.
You'll come to that,
I think I agree with my two colleagues to the extent that the problem with election management and administration goes beyond the CORD and Jubilee. And that has been the position that most of us in the civil society have articulated over a long time. And now we are very happy that we've been joined by the religious organizations. There are so many things that needs to be dealt with in the electoral process. Election management is one of them. We need to determine election dispute resolution and so many other things, including results, the results framework and how this country will handle the results. But the point, why the two sides are missing the point is this. And why we are soon getting into a stalemate is that Jubilee's position seems to be that election reforms can only be discussed if the question of election management is omitted from the agenda. And the CORD's position seems to be that meaningful electoral reforms can only be discussed if IEBC is disbanded. Now that is to miss the point. The solution is to initiate a broad-based multi-sectoral forum, the type that is proposed by the religious organization, and hopefully convene a national conference to be able to discuss comprehensively the electoral process in its entirety. The problem we are having in this country is that after 2013, everybody went into slumber. We never conducted a comprehensive post-election evaluation. Ghana did it following their 2012 elections. South Africa did it following the elections. We never did that because the country was so polarized that that conference would not be necessary. But now this is the right time for Kenyans of goodwill to come together and propose modalities in which that can necessitate.
Politically, will any of the, I mean, this will be a political decision at the end of the day, or the only way to solve it will be political, but politically, will it put any side at a disadvantage? And I'll read a text here from Irongo Ngong, who says, does the opposition believe in the Constitution? The answer is no. Can we trust them with the government? The answer is no. Let them unseat IEBC using the right method. The church should show them the way and not mediate. You keep talking about a stalemate. First, I'd like to know from you, are we going into a stalemate? Do we have a stalemate? Or do we have one side that wants to make changes in IEBC and another side just says, follow the Constitution? Does that mean it's a stalemate?
You see, even the idea that you tell people to follow the Constitution on a matter so grave as the one of IEBC is naive. It's naive in the sense that look, why are elections so emotive in Africa? That's where we start. We shouldn't even talk about IEBC before we address that bigger issue. The question is that the African state has been ethnicized, and the ethnicity goes for the state. And because of that, you know, when you ethnicize the state is like a mistress, you know, Hussein, a mistress that controls power and the resources. So that is why it becomes very emotive. Everybody is marking another one, because once you get the state, you have control over power and resources. So if we deal with the way we distribute power, the way we distribute resources, including government appointments and everything that you think about, there will be no pressure on IEBC, and we shall quickly agree. But hidden, the bigger agenda in this struggle for reforms in IEBC is how can I put in place a system that will favor me, so that I take over the state and use the state to control power and the distribution of resources. That is where the problem is.
Right.
My feeling is this, that of course we went through a delicate process of constitutional negotiation. We came up with this social contract. We don't need to unravel it. I think the problem is that both sides are using the Constitution in a very minimalistic way. And they're using the Constitution as a weapon against one another. The truth is that we have to look at both the words and the spirit of the Constitution. I think the Constitution actually has within it the mechanism and the substantive values that we should utilize to resolve this issue. It's not just a question of throwing Article 251 at CORD, or CORD throwing Article 37 at Jubilee. It's a question of harmonizing all this. And I do agree with you that there seems to be some kind of impasse. And that impasse needs to be resolved. I think IEBC is in office legally and constitutionally. But if they lose the confidence of one of the key partners in that electoral process, then can they carry out a competent election that has the confidence of everyone? Probably not.
Right.
So there is an impasse that needs to be resolved. They need to take the lead. We need to get maybe mediation or other players to come in.
And I want you to all respond to giving. Will tell me how to respond to this. But let me read another text here from Ramadan Kasaya in Busia, Teso. From where I see it, very little can be achieved via parliament. The Jubilee government prides itself in the tyranny of numbers at the expense of Kenyans. It is unfortunate. That is Amin Ramadan Kasai. So, what is the way forward then? How do you?
Let me first of all comment on the so-called stalemate, and it's a question that you rightfully asked. If you look at,
you believe there's a stalemate?
There is a stalemate, and this is how. Why? If you look at the new wave of militancy espoused by CORD, and the hardline position taken by a section of Jubilee leadership, and the unconstitutional and repressive police action, these three factors will actually compound the stalemate, and that is why there is actually really a stalemate. We have a political problem here in our hands. The solution does not rest with Parliament. I don't think those who are saying that invoke Article 251 and go via the parliamentary route is the best way to go. That will actually only compound the stalemate. The solution rests in a negotiated process, because this is a political process. But that process must not transform into a witch hunt of the commissioners. That process must leave the commissioners with their dignity intact.
Finally, what do you think then, as you tell us, I mean, how best to resolve this? All of you, what you think is the best way to resolve this? What about IEBC? Your final comments. What about IEBC? Should they play any role in this? Should they still stay put where they are? Or?
I begin from where my brother Charles Kanjaba left. You see, already there is a sizable number of people, and in fact stakeholders in this country, who think IEBC is not competent to carry out the next election. Now, the easiest option for this stalemate is for them to step down. And they step down not because of anything else, but under Article 73 of the Constitution, they say that the integrity has been brought to question, and they can no longer hold public office because a big chunk of the public they serve now think that they are not doing a good job. If they do that, they solve the first problem. But the second problem quickly emerges. This is the question of now, when we now start rehiring the IEBC, because we shall still follow the law. If they resign that way, they will also have followed the law, which is the big law, which is the Constitution. So the part two now, how do we hire the new commissioners? We shall use the same rules that were set in 2011 by the IEBC Act. Now, if we use those rules, already President Kenyatta is going to appoint 4 out of 7 commissioners. Now, that will form a new
election panel.
The election panel members after they have been presented. Now, in that case, again, I envisage a situation where CORD probably will go to court to challenge that. So that's why Felix's argument that now, if we are lucky and the IEBC look back at their own conscience and say they are not going to be subject of ridicule, so they are stepping aside. The second problem is now to bring the multi-sectoral arrangement that Felix is suggesting, and which is almost envisaged in what my brother Kajama is talking about, so that there is a political consensus on the new rules, and even reform the Act of Parliament after Kamukunji is agreed on, and then you have a new IEBC that is acceptable to all. Short of that, we are still in trouble, and the 2017 could cause us more problems.
Hussein, I think whatever solution we pick must respect the Constitution. We cannot, as the country, for example, agree to get rid of the IEBC commissioners, and yet they have some security of tenure and independence in the Constitution. If, for example, we decided we were thinking of asking them to step aside, they must consent, and if they don't consent, you must follow the Article 251 position. I don't think right now our focus should be so much on what is the best solution as in outcome, but what is the best process to get to a solution that we can all live with. And that process would definitely require the active involvement of the IEBC commissioners. We don't know the eventual outcome. They may step aside, they may remain, some may step aside, they may change the rules of engagement, but ultimately let's have a conversation where they lead or at least are key participants in the process, because that is their constitutional mandate.
Okay, very briefly.
IEBC must be an important player in any process going forward. I don't think leaving them out of this process will serve to help anything. I don't think, like I've said, that the judicial or parliamentary process is the solution. The solution rests in a negotiated, mediated, multi-sectoral process. And the most important point also is that the problem goes beyond IEBC. There are so many issues that we need to reform between now and 2017 if we are to have a credible process.
Okay, and Kipke Moi in Kericho says leaders should talk to each other, not at each other. Yani dialogue is the only way forward. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making time for us. Keep talking to us on 22422 and on Twitter using the hashtag OpinionCourt. We'll be back after this break.